Welcome into our sports talk at the stadium here at Williams-Brice Stadium. Normally, I would have a nice shot of the field behind me, but the way the sunlight's coming through, I would look like I was in the witness protection program if I actually turned around and had the field behind me. But I assure you, I am here at Williams-Brice, still hanging out here as the post-spring festivities. You can still see the remnants of a few of the alumni that played in the alumni game earlier here today. Maybe you can still see it. I don't know if you can see that or not way down there, but there are still some alumni signing autographs down on the field. It was kind of a festive day here at Williams-Brice Stadium. A nice day, cool, windy, blustery type day, but sun splashed here. And the alumni played at 11 o'clock, and then Will Muschamp ran through his first full spring game in South Carolina. And, you know, as spring games go, I'm not one that ever really puts a ton of stock in everything that happens during a spring game. You don't really learn a whole lot, in my opinion, in a spring game. But I do think you can make observations kind of on a micro level that are relevant. And a few of the things that I observed today, one, Brandon McElwain, he was the first quarterback out on the field. He was the best quarterback out on the field today. The true freshman showed some things. Now, is he a guy that you feel great about going in there and leading the Gamecocks next season to 10 wins? Probably not. In fact, if I had to bet right now, I still think that Perry Orth, with his experience of starting in the SEC, will get that first start. I think Brandon McElwain, it's going to be his job sooner rather than later. I think he'll play sooner rather than later. But I don't know that he's going to be given complete control right away. He might win the job this summer, but I think from a leadership standpoint and an experience standpoint, Perry Orth is ahead of him right now. Not a talent standpoint, but talent isn't everything when it comes to performing. But Brandon McElwain looks solid, though, no question about it. And Brian Edwards, another guy that, like McElwain 4 months ago, was in high school. He looked pretty good out there as well. He caught a couple of touchdown passes, and we didn't get to talk to either one of them because they're freshmen, even after the game. So we didn't get their thoughts, but both those guys look good, and that's a good sign in terms of the future for South Carolina. Defensively, you know, they're just doing generic stuff defensively, so you're not going to pick up a whole lot of things out there. I will say this, I think the defensive line is going to be better this year. I don't think there's any question. Now, I'm not really going out on the huge limb saying that because the defense has been so putrid the past couple of seasons. They've been bad up front. They've been bad in the back with their secondary. But I do think they're going to be much, much better up front. We all know that Will Muschamp's concerned about the secondary. That remains the case. He's concerned about playmakers on offense, and I think that's a legitimate concern. I mentioned Brian Edwards. He looks solid. Deebo Samuel looks solid. After that, and again, those guys still have a lot to prove before you're going to call them playmakers. You know, you don't become a playmaker by making a few plays in a spring game. So they have a long way to go before you can call them bona fide playmakers. But on offense, they don't really have that guy. They don't have somebody that, if you're a defensive coordinator from an opposing team, where you're going, okay, we got to watch out for this guy. Even last year, Farrell Cooper, you knew where number 11 was anytime South Carolina lined up for an offensive play. You paid attention. You probably put a star next to 22 and Brandon Wiles and said that's a running back that you got to pay attention to. Out of the backfield, he can catch passes. He can break it off. He has some speed. So they had guys. You know, Jarrell Adams was a guy that you needed to pay attention to when he lined up at that tight end slot. They don't have any of those guys, at least established right now. They might be on the roster. They might be there, but they're going to go into this season not knowing who those guys are, and that's a scary proposition, certainly. So I think the offense is going to be a work in progress this year. They're going to be tough to watch at times. I mentioned McElwain, and he looked very good at times. I think he has that poise, that pocket presence that you want. He's not a huge guy. He doesn't have a lot of height. But he's a strong guy, and he can run. He's quick. Now, the defense couldn't hit him, so that always helps you run the ball. He had an 18-yard touchdown that should have been called back for a hold, but in typical spring game fashion, Will Muschamp declined that penalty, and so the play stood, and it was a touchdown. That's the kind of thing that you get in a spring game. Melvin Ingram caught a two-point conversion, so it was that kind of day. Nobody off the sideline caught a pass. So maybe they've made improvements from the Steve Spurrier era where guys would just stroll in off the sideline and catch plays for touchdowns. So you take everything, as I said earlier, kind of with a grain of salt. But I do think they're going to be better defensively on that defensive line. And I think offensively, they have some guys, they have some players that need to emerge. And I know they have some other guys coming in this summer that they think that are going to be able to help them out. But it's to me, I would be very concerned about the Gamecock offense next season in conference play. I think they're going to go backwards some. Offensive line should be pretty good. They have a chance to be a solid unit. They're going to have to. I think they have quarterbacks on campus that are going to be pretty good, but the lack of experience. If they start Orth, he has experience, but he doesn't have the talent. So they're going to take some lumps there on offense. But Will Muschamp seemed pretty pleased. You can listen to what he had to say. It's posted right above me here in this very story. All my observations also posted there. I'm kind of rehashing some of them now. But I thought it was a great day, a great event that Will Muschamp put on. They had 30,000 plus that showed up again on a pretty cool blustery day out here at Williams-Brice Stadium to get a look at this team. They played hard. They did there was some hitting out there. They did their best to protect people. And I do think big picture wise, it's going to be okay at South Carolina. I think that you can make an argument that Will Muschamp in his first spring game is inheriting less talent, certainly less playmakers than Steve Spurrier did when he took over the program from Lou Holtz. And I know Spurrier took the program to levels that it's never been before. But that being said, he kind of left it about the same way he found it in terms of talent. And, Spurrier had a Coach Simpson, a Jonathan Joseph. He had Sidney Rice. He had some experience at quarterback and a Blake Mitchell that at least knew how to throw the ball around some. Will Muschamp, he doesn't really have quite as much. That doesn't mean he won't get back there. I think they will. I think they're doing a fine job. I think they have some good players on this team. And I do think they do have some guys up front. They probably have more depth up front on their lines, offensive, defensive, than Spurrier had, and they'll be better on defense than what South Carolina was in that first year in the Spurrier. They certainly have a much better defensive philosophy in place now. John Thompson isn't calling the plays, and Muschamp will have a much better mentality for his defensive players. So spring is in the books. I think Muschamp feels like he accomplished a lot in the spring and kind of setting his tone and what his program is going to be about. The tempo, the pace, the sense of urgency. You can see the difference between Steve Spurrier and Will Muschamp. And none of this, by the way, is a knock on Steve Spurrier. I know it's easy for people to start kicking guys when they're gone and out the door, but it's just a contrasting style, plain and simple. You just have two different mentalities, two different philosophies, and you can see that. I mean, there were definite signs that Steve Spurrier is long gone, not just because at halftime he wasn't making his little speech like he always does when he takes the microphone and starts introducing the spring award winners and all of that. There just weren't as many throws down the field. You're not going to see as much of that with the offense with Steve Spurrier. It's going to be a lot more control. Certainly the tempo. There was more physicality even in this spring game, and they didn't hit the quarterbacks, but there were some tackles to the ground out there that were maybe harder. And I know throughout the spring, not just in the spring game, there's been some very physical practices, and how that all plays out in the long run, we shall see. But it was a productive and solid spring. They didn't have any major injuries. I would have liked to see Lorenzo Nunez running around out there, and certainly Perry Orth, who I think is still going to be a major factor in this quarterback job. I'm not ready to just hand it to Brandon McElwain. We all know that Jake Bentley is going to come in there and see what he can do. He'd be a long shot because he's behind everybody else. I don't think Nunez is ever going to be a significant contributor at quarterback on a consistent basis. I haven't seen that from him yet. I've been proven wrong before. I'd be surprised if this is an example where that happens. I do think the quarterback race is really a two-man race now. That's not a secret between McElwain and Orth, and I still give the slight edge to Orth. He will be ready to go again June 1st. Full go and throwing just because of that experience. So you don't have to just hand the ball in game one, which is a road game in the SEC, no less, to a true freshman. Doesn't mean he won't play him, doesn't mean he won't get some series, but you go out there and let your experienced guy who's started at Texas A&M, who started at Tennessee, who started against Clemson, who's got some game experience. That's huge. I think we undervalue sometimes experience over, in and hype up too much potential. And sometimes experience can trump potential when you're talking about making that first start, especially at the quarterback position. But Brandon McElwain, there's no reason to think that he's not going to be a very solid quarterback and a solid player at South Carolina once he kind of establishes himself and settles in. So that's going to do it from here at Williams-Brice Stadium. And I'm actually in the visiting coaches box right now where I'm doing the sports talk at the stadium. Appreciate you checking this out. We'll be on Sports Talk Monday. I'll be in there. Corn will be there. The professor breaking down all of these games, this game and the Orange and White Spring game up at Clemson, taking your phone calls, getting your thoughts, and a whole lot more. Give us a follow at Sports Talk SC. You can follow me at KMac Must Die, and we appreciate you checking us out here, Sports Talk at the Stadium.